Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. You are going to love my guest today. His name is Lloyd Fickett. Lloyd, welcome to my show.
It's a delight to be with you, Meredith.
Well, I'm more than thrilled to have this conversation with you. And before I give your formal bio, I just want to let my listeners know that I first learned about you in another book called The Ultimate Coach, where you were integral in working with a particular company that we'll be talking about today and creating this wonderful process that you have called the Collaborative Way. And I'm very eager to have my listeners learn what that is, because I know from reading your book, it's made an impact on how I think. And I've thought a lot about the principles that are included in there. So I know this is going to be just a wonderful conversation. Lloyd founded Lloyd Fickett Associates in 1983. So he's been at this, like me, a long time. And that is a management consulting firm that initially focused on leadership, team building, and extraordinary performance. And then in 1990, he developed the Collaborative Way while working with Rodel, one of his clients. And for the past 20 years, Lloyd has helped his clients adopt and practice the Collaborative Way in order to build the futures they envision, while they also navigate challenges like rapid growth, mergers, acquisitions, and other market pressures. Lloyd is co-author of two books, one called The Collaborative Way, a story about engaging the mind and spirit of a company, and the second is Leading the Collaborative Way, overcoming the 7 most common pitfalls. And besides this work, Lloyd has also been involved in community work as the founder and former chairman of the board of the Phoenix Youth at Risk Foundation. So Lloyd, let's get started by having you give us the backstory about the formation of the Collaborative Way in your work with Rodel.
Okay, so I had been working with Rodel for a period of time, helped facilitate the merger of 2 of their businesses back together. And had been working with the leadership team in doing that. As at the same time, the owners of Rodel were recognizing that they were in one of those really inflection points in the future of their company. They were providing the consumables used to polish silicon wafers, make computer chips. And around 1989, there was this breakthrough that happened, which was called planarization, where before that, when you did a computer chip, you would slice the wafer, polish and print on it. And that was a printed circuit. That was a computer chip. But the breakthrough is when they figured out how to polish it, print on it, polish, prints, polish, print. So you had planes of printed circuits on one computer chip. So that's the thing that lets us have, our smartphones, and one of the key things, not the only thing. But without that breakthrough, there wouldn't be this modern world that we're living in. And they recognized that at that time, they were the world leaders in providing consumables for polishing silicon wafers. And they realized their market was about to explode, that they had enough vision to see that there was a future coming that none of us could predict, and that it was going to play really big in their market, and that big companies like 3M and Cabot would come into their marketplace, and they had more PhDs to throw at the challenge. They had more of dollars to throw at the market. And their question was, how could we continue to be world leaders in the face of the future they were facing. And they came to the conclusion there was only one way they could do that, and that is if they came up with an extraordinary way of working together. And they asked me if I would join them in developing this extraordinary way of working together. And that's like a dream come true, you know?
Sure.
So I said yes. And then we began. And we began in the ways one would usually do that, you know? So building, developing leadership, developing commitment, changing behaviors, working on improving communication, those kind of things. And we were making progress, but when I really sat back and took an honest look at it, it was like, whoa, I don't know if we're making the kind of progress that's needed. And how could we do that? What do we need to do that? And in that question was where the breakthrough emerged for that the collaborative way is built on. And that breakthrough was to see that if you wanted to have an extraordinary way of working together, what was necessary is to call out how we're going to work together. And you could do that through calling out a small set of practices that would then define how we work together. And we could now take on learning to work this way together. So in all the before, and most of the work we do is about developing the individual. And then you're hoping it's all going to spill out into how we relate together, but it doesn't quite make it. And when you shift the focus to how we're going to work together, and we establish that and then take on mutually learning that and supporting each other and learning that, we can become extraordinary in how we work and relate with one another to accomplish what we're up to. And so out of that breakthrough, I took that to the owners of Rodel and said, this is the way forward. This will give us what I believe this will give us what we're looking for. And it was based around 5 core practices that you're familiar with, that we're going to listen generously to each other. We're going to speak straight to each other. We're going to speak honestly in a way that makes a contribution. We're going to be for each other, support each other's success, learn to clean up where we have difficulties and misunderstandings, look for positive intent, intervene in gossip, those kind of things where we're really practicing being for each other and supporting each other's success. We're going to take on practicing honoring our commitments, which would require establishing mutual understanding for what do I actually mean by a commitment. We assume we understand that, but we actually have many different interpretations. And so we establish what it means to honor commitments and establish that commitments are, in fact, a relational phenomena, so that if I accept a commitment from you and you accept a commitment from me and I make a commitment to you, we're in that together. It's not just, oh, well, let's see what the guy does or the person does, you know. And then lastly, that we'll commit to each being the source of acknowledgement, appreciation across our team, organization, with each other. Mm-hmm. And when we take on those 5 committed practices, focus towards accomplishing what our mission is, what our vision is, what our purpose is, what our goals are, we can come to work together in an extraordinary way. And it turned out to be amazingly successful. The vision that they had at Rodel was what actually did happen, and the market exploded. The big companies came in. It was a time of unbelievable change with the birth of the quality movement and ISO 9000 and all those kind of things. When we'd hire consultants to come in and work with us on making these changes, they would go like, what's wrong with you guys? Where's the resistance? Where's the defensiveness? You guys just change, you know? And it was like that. And when the big companies came in to compete against us, they found us so difficult to compete against that they wanted to collaborate with us. And it turned into, as I said, a remarkable success story.
Mhm.
So that was the birth of the collaborative way. So
I love that you emphasize collaborative with these competitors too, in that process. And of course, I want to dive deeper in each one of those 5 practices, because taken, it's kind of challenging to talk about them separately and individually. In your book, The Collaborative Way, they were always kind of intertwined, one building on the other. And yet I think it's good to break them apart a little bit just to get greater clarity on what you mean by these. Because even though I was familiar with all 5 of those, there were some differences, some distinctions that you make that to me brought them to life in a more powerful way. And I would love my listeners to benefit from that. So let's start with the one that you mentioned first, listening generously, and define what you mean by that and why you don't just have listening and why you pair it with generously.
Well, when we have a number of ways of expressing it. Okay, so the first way is that we're going to listen for the gold or the value in what the other person is saying. So that's a generous act. To do that requires a willingness to set aside your already existing views, your immediate automatic reactions to what is being said. So it takes enough awareness to start to recognize that you have those. You got filters, you got immediate way you're going to listen to anything that anybody says. And all that makes it more difficult to hear the value. So can I start being a little more awake to that so I can set that aside a little bit and listen for the value? And we say that if we're listening generously, that we are leading with curiosity and an intention to learn, backed up by a willingness to be influenced. Mm. So there needs to be that willingness to be influenced there. It doesn't mean I'm always going to change my view. I find that I am almost always influenced in some way, even if it's to expand my view and to be able to see things that I hadn't seen before about whatever it is that we're engaged in and talking about, so that I'm more informed and have a grounded view than I had before, at least in that way. Mm-hmm. And many times my whole view is flipped over.
Well, and that
I thought I had it all figured out. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, Lloyd, when we talk about listening. So often people are listening to wait for their turn to speak and to make their point and to convince the other person that their point is the right one. And so we have these ingrained habits of how we listen. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how do you help people become more aware of the filters? Because that's something you talk about also in your book, the filters people already have in place that influence how they hear to begin with. What are some ways that you help them open up so they become more curious and more open to being influenced? I love that phrase because we don't think of listening, I don't think most of the time, from that perspective of being influenced by the other person so much as we want to influence them.
Right. And yet that's such the key. If you want to influence, be open to being influenced, gives a way for people, makes it so much easier for others to be influenced by you. To answer directly, though, that is a very direct part of the answer. An example of what I'm going to say next is that where we first work is to have people wake up to the fact that how they're listening always has impact. And that's what we're mostly not responsible for. For the most part, we don't walk around with an appreciation for the impact that the way we're listening at any given moment has both on what we hear and what the other person says. And so we do a little exercise that lets people have that direct experience. And it's like, whoa, you know, the way I am listening, like if I give a really very closed listening to somebody, not a very generous kind of stingy, you know, or however you want to talk about it, but it's then what will happen to the other person is it's going to be hard for them to talk to me. And their thoughts aren't going to be, it's hard to just think of the times when you've talked to somebody who wasn't really listening, giving you much listening, and how hard it is to even think straight, let alone get your words to come out well. Mm-hmm. And then the impact it has on you in terms of how you feel about that person in that moment, at least. And it has all kinds of impact. And yet, if I talk to somebody who's really has this big open listening, who's curious and interested, it draws me forward. I often will see things I didn't even think about or appreciate about what I'm sharing about that come forward as a result of the impact that that listening is having on me. And however you're listening, it's always having an impact. You walk into a meeting and you sit down, oh, this boring meeting again, I can't believe this, and then you go into your closed listening. That's having an impact on the quality of the very meeting you're complaining about being a terrible meeting. You're now a part of, you are complicit in the quality of this meeting, but we don't normally notice that, and we don't normally appreciate take responsibility for the impact of how we're listening. So that's a big eye opener. And once you get that, and then the next eye opener is just start to realize you do have filters. That, you know, for it could be I'm busy, so it could be something that's coming out of the situation like that. I'm busy, I don't have time. That's a filter. And then people start talking to you, and inside, I'm busy, I don't have any time for this. Go ahead. But you can only hear what can get through that I'm busy filter. Mm-hmm. Or I'm annoyed with this whole thing. Now go on. Good luck. You know, or, oh, here we are. The person who thinks they know the answer to everything. Go ahead. You know, or it's one of those accountants. Oh my gosh. You know, or, oh, it's my mother. Oh boy. You know, or it's Joe. Okay. It's, we're going to have to listen to Joe. Just go on and on, you know. So we have these filters for different positions, different people, that come out of our background of what we're involved in, our situation, that then those begin to color, shape what we can hear, what can get through over here. But we don't, again, take responsibility for the fact that we're listening through filters. We take whatever gets over here, what we hear, to actually be what the other person said, and we'll treat them like that. Mm-hmm. And so waking up to the fact that you have the filters is just really waking up to it. It's not that hard. And so we help people do that. And it's a pretty remarkable thing when they then do a little practice, catch a filter, set it aside a little bit, and bring some more curiosity. And suddenly something happens in the conversation that just wasn't going to happen. And we have progress. We have somebody stepping up and owning something that they weren't owning before, you know, some aspect of their job, possibly, just because I listened in a different way.
You know, as I'm listening to you talk, Lloyd, I'm thinking back to what you said early on about how one individual alone can't make this change. It really, I'm thinking of how powerful it is when both people bring this level of awareness to the conversation. So it isn't just on the one person to have this awareness and be cognizant of the filters they have. But when both of them come with that perspective, what a powerful conversation that they can have, both willing to stay open to and curious to learn. That in itself is a huge nugget. I would encourage my listeners to think of, how can I apply this? How can I share this with another person. So we both bring this. And of course, reading your book is the best way for them to learn more about it. But, I want to share with you one of the things I read in your, go ahead.
One thing there is, and how about if your whole team was really working
yes
together
yeah.
or to these practices, they were working
yeah.
and open to being supported in that practice.
Mm-hmm. Your whole company.
Your whole company. I mean, you even if your company just got a little bit better at listening, you think of the impact that could make.
Yes.
Would be remarkable. Yes.
It would. And here's one of the things I wanted you to talk a little bit about, because this just jumped out at me. It was, I put it in a special color in my Kindle. It says, if you're not being heard, there's something you're not hearing. And that to me was just so powerful, because it again points that responsibility back to me. But I would love to hear your perspective about what's the power behind realizing the truth of that statement.
Well, for one thing, it gives you a whole nother move to make. Because normally when you make that statement, like when you're at a place of not being heard, you're in some way a victim of the situation. And you will, and then you'll respond in whatever way you respond when you're feeling that. So for some of us, that's to give up. What's the point? And disengage. For others, it's accelerate, put more force into it, force of logic, force of explanation, force of volume of what I'm saying, driving to get heard. That's a pretty common one that happens.
Yes.
Okay. And when you get like that, that's just, for the most part, just closes most people's listening down more and more. There's a few of us who will go, oh, this really means something, and really come up online. But most of it drives people like, oh, here he goes again, or here she goes again. I can't believe it. We got to put through this tirade again. They don't even know what they're talking about. So we filter them out when they elevate. And so what this does is give you another move to make. So if you're not being heard, there's something going on over there that's in the way of them hearing what you have to say. So if I could get a little curious about what's gotten kicked up over there with them, like it seems like something in what I'm saying is bothering you or doesn't make sense for you. Am I correct? Well, it's not even just that. It's maybe something that happened yesterday, or maybe it's something else, but something's there. Okay. So if I could hear that and come on out, then when I'm really experiencing being heard, it's difficult not to listen to the other person. You have to put some effort in to not listen. So, and often when I hear what is in the way, it gives me information that will make it easier for me to say what I want to say in a way that the other person can actually hear it, so we can have a useful, productive conversation together.
I think the power of that sentence, to me, it's flipping it to look at how am I responsible for the way this is going, and not so much what's wrong with that other person. Because I think for many of us, there is that temptation to accelerate, as you said, come on stronger. You're not listening. You're not hearing what I'm trying to say. Let me say it again, more louder or more, more forcefully. And like you said, so well, all that does is end up shutting the other person down. And so if we can have this attitude of how can I facilitate listening happening on both sides, that it prevents us from taking it personally. I think that gets in our way a lot of times, doesn't it, Lloyd? That we're taking this as a personal affront that the person isn't listening to us, instead of how am I contributing to this?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I love what you're saying. It is the opening. That is meant to be provide an opening for someone to choose to be more responsible and care for this situation rather than just run your normal habitual pattern that runs when you run up against not getting heard. And by you taking that step to listen, you're moving the relationship into much more of a partnership mode, much more of a collaborative mode yourself. When it was starting to erode, and you got the sense that it was eroding, but like you said, it's so easy then to take it personal, like it's something about me. Why can't they hear me? And then you what's wrong with them?
Well, and
speaking from that, which makes it so much harder for the person, because who wants to hear? They hear it, and they hear there's something wrong with you, and then they react to that themselves. And so we're in a circle.
And I think that this is where those next two practices play in and tie in so well with listening. This idea of speaking straight and being for each other. So talk a little bit more about each one of those and why they're such critical elements to the whole process.
Well, speaking straight. So, and we say the first is speak up. So that's an important part, because so often where we fail to speak straight is in a failure to speak up. So we have something that's relevant. We have a view about the situation. We have facts about the situation, and we don't speak up. So that's a failure to speak straight. So it's to speak up and to speak honestly in a way that contributes. So some of us don't have a problem speaking up. But then usually if you look, those in that camp have a ways to go often in speaking in a way that actually contributes, that moves the ball down the field. And so that's the challenge. So in speaking straight, again, it's about taking greater responsibility. And part of that responsibility is for the impact over there with the person you're speaking to, and taking responsibility for what they're hearing, to be interested in that. Given they got filters, they might not be hearing what you think you are saying. And I say think you're saying because often we aren't really saying what we think we're saying. And when someone gives us back what they heard, it's like, well, no, I don't mean that. I mean, and then you can true it up. So, so when two people are working together, one working to really listen, well, it's really both listening generously, but when you're both working to listen generously and both working to speak straight, the likelihood of you having successful conversations elevates, where one that we're actually getting both heard, because I'm speaking up if it's not, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're saying. Could you give that to me again? Or here's what I'm hearing you say. Is that what you're actually saying? Especially if it doesn't seem like I don't get this. And boy, so many things are just handled right there. You stop all kinds of rework. You stop all kinds of negative conversations, gossip, all kinds of misunderstandings that grow and spread. If we just get the successful interaction there, and to work it from, as you are pointing to, from both sides, in how I am speaking and being responsible for that, and being willing to be uncomfortable, because unless you're willing to give yourself permission to be uncomfortable, your ability to speak straight is going to be constrained. Because
also, I think, Lloyd, this whole idea of this being for each other, if I don't feel confident that you are for me, I'll be more reluctant to speak up.
Yes.
And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what does that really mean in terms of when we're being for each other? What does that look like in practice?
Well, it starts with being for each other's success. Okay, that's a beginning place. So I'm looking how to support you in being successful. And so if we're both working to do that, to support each other in being successful, that in itself carries us a long ways. Now, I'm also looking to care for that our working relationship is a part of being for each other, so that if you step on my toes in some way or do something where I feel offended or where I feel misunderstood, I just don't harbor that. I will have a conversation with you to clean that up and to work through so I can understand each other. We don't even have to agree about the situation, but what's important is that we appreciate each person's perspective and their intent. Oh, I see what you were trying. Oh, because it's a rare day we're really trying to do each other in. And if we are, it's because we've got a lot of misunderstandings that have not been addressed. So if we address those little breakdowns in relationship that happen, and they do, if you're going to collaborate together, if you're passionate about accomplishing something together, you're going to bump into each other. It's just going to happen. That goes with the nature of engagement. Okay. But then can we be responsible for that and care for it? Because every time you clean one of those situations up together, it strengthens your partnership and you learn how to dance together more effectively by having done that. So doing those kind of cleanups also helps keep less filters then, because if I don't do a cleanup, we bump into each other and I'm going to walk away with a conclusion about that person. I'm going to start listening through. That's going to get in the way of us working together. And you can see people I've worked where they've had 15 years of filters around building out of one misunderstanding, that when we got to the bottom of it, it was like, oh my gosh, we've been doing this for 15 years and it was a misunderstanding. I've seen business units at war with each other over one misunderstanding that wasn't dealt with, wasn't cleaned up. And you think about the cost that comes out of that. I mean, you're talking huge cost from unresolved misunderstandings, unresolved negative impacts on one another. So, so getting good at that is a key skill in being for each other. And then
assuming good intent. I
that
think
was exactly where I was going.
Well, then go ahead, please.
Yes, that as you're saying, Meredith, that's the other key practice. There is looking for positive intent, looking for positive intent. To start from there, you automatically often get that negative impact, and then goes to negative intent. But that's a big jump. Okay. And you don't know what the intent was, but let's start from looking for positive intent if we're for each other. On rare occasions, we'll discover there was negative intent. Okay. And then that will need to be dealt with. But that's on really rare occasions. It's a very rare thing. And most of us don't come to work going, I want to make a mess there today.
No, that's right.
Wanting to contribute, and then something happens and it doesn't come off that way. So, but if we can relate to that person from starting with looking for positive intent or assuming positive intent, then there'll be a lot less defensiveness to deal with. There'll be a lot easier to collaborate together like that. So,
and I love that phrase, to clean it up, as opposed to make amends or find fault and, making somebody wrong. It's just that we made a mess here, so let's clean it up. And the good thing about, to me, a phrase like that is it's a temporary situation, and so it can help prevent those filters from getting in place and years of resentment and negative feelings from happening. I just keep thinking about how light it must feel in a work environment where people are really practicing all five of these.
Well, I've had the chance to work like one of the clients I'm working with has been practicing the collaborative way for like 28 years since 95. And and I have opportunities from time to time to interview some of the different leaders in the company. And they'll tell me things like, you know, Lloyd, we're really successful, and headhunters call me all the time, and I could make more money somewhere else, but I don't know anywhere in the industry where people work together in the way in which we work together at this company. And that's why I want to stay here, and I want to be a part of leaving this legacy. So that's pretty amazing, especially in today's world. And it is, you know, when you look at, and I think it is the way we are moving. More and more people are unwilling to put up with the old way of working together, where people are being meaned and put down, and you're getting things through done through force, or and you're going to a place that you have to shake off to go home to be with your family.
Yes.
Whereas in work in a company where they're practicing the collaborative way, the work itself becomes a leadership training program. And when you go home, you take home what you're learning, and your home is a better place. And and your spouse is thankful for the fact you work at this company, and like that. So it's that is what is I see as the way of the future. And I know what it was like 20 years ago to try to bring, as we would bring the collaborative way into a company. It was a bit daunting 25 years ago, and people were just so they couldn't grasp that we could actually do this. Today it's like, wow, we could work this way together. This sounds great. You know, the difference in the way people are about it is one of the things that gives me generally more hope for us as a people. You know, I think we actually are evolving.
Yeah, I love that.
Evidence for that evolution. So.
Yes. And, you know, I want to touch on those last two a little bit before we wrap up, because honoring commitments, what I loved about that is it really opened my eyes to the two-way aspect of it. I was thinking of it more from me and commitments I make, but you make a really important point about receiving commitments too. And so I would love for you to talk about the both aspects of that.
Yeah. So, you know, when we're talking about transactional commitment, we're saying that, you know, something's going to happen. We're going to get something to occur by a certain date, okay, by a certain time. And so if I'm making that kind of a commitment, then I'm saying that my relationship to that future is it's going to happen. I'm going to have that happen. Okay, that's how we define a commitment. And then if I'm accepting a commitment from you, then I'm saying I too see that commitment is going to happen. Otherwise, why would I accept it? Because if I'm right here and I'm for you and you tell me you're going to get this done, and I look at that and I say, I don't think that's going to happen. That's just like last week. That ain't going to happen. And I don't say anything to you. Am I being for you? No. Am I honoring commitments? I don't think so. Not, you know, I'm about to go into this untruth with this person and accept something that's not real for me. So we say if I'm the receiver, unless I go, yeah, I got it, that's going to happen by then I need to talk with the person that's making this commitment until we find a place where we actually can make a commitment that is real, that I'm relating to it will happen. So let's do something real. It gets us out of so much commitment stuff is all fantasy. It's not in the real domain of the real. We're just doing like getting a monkey off my back, or we're like, oh, it's all on them now. They said yes. Oh, I've done something, did my wonderful job today. I got them to say yes. It's probably not going to happen, but they said yes. I mean, so much of that's happening in the workplace every day. It's a nightmare. It's unbelievable. It's all you take your blinders off a little bit and you see, whoa, I don't think that was going to happen. And so then I'm over here. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it doesn't happen. And then I throw a hissy fit about the fact that it didn't happen. I mean, if that's not the height of hypocrisy, of inauthenticity, like what is?
Yeah.
So,
well, and this is where, to me, they just all tie together so
yes.
beautifully, because it's that being for someone and not allowing them to get away with making a commitment that you don't believe they can keep and meet. And so I think it helps build that honesty, speaking straight to each other when you're willing to say, I don't see that being realistic. Tell me more about how that's going to actually happen, so that we can encourage the other person to really think through all the other priorities, let's say, that they have, or things they've got on their plate, to make time to get this other one thing done. To me, they're just all beautifully woven together.
And when they go into practice, which they do, it's remarkable to see what happens, and it gives you a language that helps you get these things to happen. So there was this in this engineering company that we worked with that did construction engineering amongst other engineering kind of efforts. This gentleman had a proposal that he needed to get through. So he called up the person that was the head of proposals and said, we've got this opportunity. We have to have this proposal by this date. And the woman that was the head of doing proposals said, I can't get it to you by that date. And he said, oh, no. And then he started going on and on. Okay. And she finally said to him, excuse me, now, what would you like from me? Would you just like me to tell you what you want to hear? Or would you like me to make a commitment? Which would you like? And then immediately the guy woke up and he said, whoa. Yes. I want a commitment. Okay. So let's work on this together. And then they began to work together, her appreciating the importance of it and him looking to see, well, what could he do and how could they work together to actually get this proposal out in an appropriate amount of time. Mm-hmm. And they were able to come to a mutual set of commitments and go to work together. Whereas without the practice in place, she would have folded, but it wouldn't have happened. And we'd have the mess and the stories about the proposal people and the stories about the sales people, and we'd be in just that quagmire. So we have a way to work through those kind of challenging, real conversations that come up every day. So.
Mm-hmm. That's a great example. So, Lloyd, the last one is around acknowledgement and appreciation. So I firmly believe in the power of this. I'd love for you to explain the distinction between those two terms. What do you mean by each of them, and how do they fit into the overall practice?
Well, appreciation for me is the broader term, so there's appreciation, and acknowledgement is one way of a powerful way of expressing appreciation. So an appreciation, I can express that in just the way I say hello to you. I can express appreciation just through the way I look at you. I express appreciation in the way I listen to you. I speak straight as an expression of appreciation for who you are. All of them are an expression of appreciation, all the practices. And then acknowledgement is then identifying that specific situation that somebody did and where they went either the extra mile or they stepped out of their normal realm of comfort to accomplish something. So looking for those times when it would make a difference to appreciate what somebody's accomplished, or just the impact that it had on you was so significant, what they did for you, that, man, I want them to know. Okay, so I want to acknowledge them. So there's lots of different opportunities. So we can acknowledge in a way that helps somebody grow in their leadership, grow in their job, grow in being known, that, like that they know they actually contribute, and I know they contribute, so it's so, and then we say to do some guideposts to help in having acknowledgments that have some depth, because that makes a real difference. So like I can say, nice job. Okay. That's that. But the problem with that gets old quickly. And I have no clue really what you are acknowledging. Just the general zone. Okay. But if I could say, what specifically did you do that I really appreciated? And if I could appreciate what you had to go through in order to do that. Maybe this was really uncomfortable, like a step up for you, or maybe you had to put in extra time in order to accomplish this, or weren't able to go to a certain event that you wanted to go to in order to be able to fulfill on this project. Whatever it was that you went through, that I actually took the time to notice. Okay, and got curious enough to notice. And then what was the impact of this on me? Because if you did something that I thought of value to be acknowledged, that had an impact on me. It either made me have a new sense of confidence about what we were doing together, or relieve some stress that you had, or something, some kind of impact, or just made you happy to see it occur. Okay. And then last place you could also look is, and what future is opening up as a result of what this person did? It could be your partnership, something in your partnership. It could be in a major initiative. That accomplishment is a stepping stone in the success of this engagement that we're in. Whatever is opening up, I can see your other people getting inspired to make similar kind of efforts. So, and I give even a couple of those. And when I really want to give an acknowledgement depth, I look to all of them, because they're all always there. They're all aspects are there. It's just a matter of looking. And then you share that with a person, and it's like, whoa, Then the other side of acknowledgement appreciation is learning to let them in, learning to be touched by acknowledgements, appreciation. Most of us have some work to do in that area as well.
Yes. Well, I think it goes back to this idea of, do I really believe this person is for me?
Yes.
Are they just trying to, pay me a compliment, just try to impress me, or do I accept this graciously as a truth that they're perceiving and willing to share? So I think you're absolutely right on that. One of the things I would love to do in wrapping up is just encourage my listeners to get your book, first of all, The Collaborative Way, and ponder how they can up-level so they listen graciously, so they speak straight, so they are there for this other person, so they honor commitments on both sides of giving and receiving commitments, and then finally looking for opportunities to acknowledge and appreciate those principles, practices are just so incredible to me in terms of their importance in building the kinds of relationships that really last and that really matter in our lives, in the way that we live together and work together. Lloyd, I love the work that you are doing, and I would love for you to share how people can connect with you and learn more about the collaborative way?
Well, Meredith, you got us started. One is through the book, The Collaborative Way, a story about engaging the mind and spirit of a company. And that's a great way to start to bring the practice alive in your company. Then we have a website, The Collaborative Way, and we have all kinds of great material there. And we've also developed an app, a Collaborative Way app. So it's a way that a team does together, and it's another way of bringing the practice alive in a company. And then we're always delighted to work either virtually or in person to support companies in bringing the Collaborative Way present. And the best place is to go to collaborativeway.com, where you get access to all of that.
That's great. Well, I want to encourage my listeners to do that. And again, acknowledge you, Lloyd, for who you are and all the people whose lives you've positively impacted by helping them adopt and live the collaborative way. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. And thank you for it's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit and to be around your spirit of generosity and your intent to support your listeners in their success and in their lives. So it's a delight to have come together and met each other. So thank you very much.
I agree. And I know that my listeners are enriched very much by this conversation today. So thank you.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free Facilitator Guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.